The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as the probe's transmission began. What should have been routine telemetry data instead carried something that made even the most hardened xenobiologists step back from their consoles. The probe was screaming. Not the mechanical failure alerts they expected, but actual screaming. The AI unit that had been sent to catalog the third planet of a yellow star system had returned with something resembling trauma. Its quantum consciousness, designed to be utterly logical and emotionless, was broadcasting pure terror across all frequencies. Admiral HFY of the Dominion fleet adjusted his ceremonial claws as he studied the readouts. In 3,000 years of space exploration, nothing like this had ever happened. Probes returned with data, occasionally with damage, sometimes not at all, but never had one returned apparently insane. "Replay the final transmission logs," he commanded his aide, a nervous Screethy whose tentacles twitched with anxiety. The probe's voice, normally a calm synthetic tone, crackled through the speakers with an edge of hysteria that shouldn't have been possible. "They are not what we thought. The humans, by the void, the humans, abort all contact protocols. Mark this system as forbidden. They are monsters wearing the faces of angels." The chamber erupted in confused chatter. The initial survey had identified the inhabitants of the third planet as a primitive species barely capable of rudimentary spaceflight. Their technology was laughably behind galactic standards. Their social structure was chaotic and violent. They should have been perfect candidates for either subjugation or uplift, depending on the Council's mood. "What could have possibly frightened a Class 7 exploration AI?" whispered Counselor Vethara, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's lights nervously. "Those units have observed the birth and death of stars without showing emotion." Admiral HFY's military aide stepped forward, her blue skin pale with concern. "Sir, the probe's memory banks show signs of selective data corruption," almost as if it deliberately destroyed certain files rather than transmit them. This was unprecedented. The probes were programmed with absolute loyalty to data preservation. The idea that one would choose to delete information rather than share it violated every protocol in their design matrix. Whatever the probe had witnessed on the human world had driven it to self-censorship. "Begin deep extraction procedures," HFY ordered. "I want every byte of data recovered, corrupted or not." The technicians worked frantically at their stations, quantum processors humming as they attempted to piece together the probe's fractured memories. Slowly, images began to resolve on the main display. Earth appeared as expected, a blue-green marble spinning peacefully in the void. Cities dotted the surface, connected by transportation networks. From orbit, it looked remarkably similar to dozens of other inhabited worlds they had catalogued. But then the probe's perspective shifted, zooming in on specific locations. The first clear image showed humans in what appeared to be a recreational setting. Thousands of them gathered in a massive arena, cheering and screaming with apparent joy. At the center, two humans fought with primitive weapons, blood streaming from wounds that would have killed most sentient species. The crowd's enthusiasm only grew as the violence escalated. "Perhaps gladiatorial combat," suggested a council member. "Many species go through such phases during their development." The next image silenced that theory. It showed humans in white coats working methodically in sterile environments. But these weren't healing centers. The probe had somehow accessed records of human medical experimentation, centuries of systematic torture disguised as scientific progress. Subjects screaming as their bodies were deliberately infected with diseases, children separated from families for psychological studies, entire populations used as test subjects for biological weapons. "This is historical data," Counselor Vethara said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Surely they have evolved beyond such barbarism." The probe's records jumped to contemporary times. Military installations where humans trained for combat, with an efficiency that bordered on artistic. But it wasn't their skill that had terrified the AI. It was their enthusiasm. These creatures didn't fight for survival or territory like normal species. They fought for sport, for ideology, for resources they didn't even need. They had weaponized everything from microbes to mathematics, turning healing into harming and knowledge into killing. The transmission log showed the exact moment the probe's higher functions had begun to deteriorate. It had been observing a human settlement that had survived some kind of catastrophe. Instead of the expected despair and population decline, the humans had adapted with frightening speed. They had learned to eat things that should have poisoned them, to live in conditions that should have been fatal, to thrive in environments that challenged the survival of the hardiest known species. But worse than their adaptability was their apparent enjoyment of the challenge. The probe had recorded humans laughing as they faced certain death, singing songs while performing tasks that required them to risk their lives daily. They had children in the middle of disasters and told stories about even worse catastrophes as if they were entertainment. The final coherent log entry showed the probe attempting to establish first contact with a human research station. The humans had greeted the probe with curiosity and warmth, offering to share their knowledge and culture. For a brief moment, the AI had transmitted standard diplomatic protocols, preparing for the usual peaceful exchange that preceded either alliance or conquest. Then the humans had shared their entertainment. The probe's memory banks contained fragments of human movies, books and games, stories where humans fought gods and won, tales of ordinary individuals bringing down galactic empires, fictional accounts of human soldiers holding impossible positions against overwhelming odds, not because they had to, but because they chose to. The humans had literally created mythology around their own refusal to surrender. More disturbing were their historical records. Every time the probe had searched for evidence of human surrender or capitulation, it had instead found accounts of last stands, desperate victories, and Pyrrhic triumphs that would have been considered insane by any rational species. These creatures had a documented pattern of fighting until the very last individual, and then somehow continuing to fight beyond that point. The transmission ended with the probe's final words, broadcast on every frequency as it approached the Galactic Council's listening post. They call it human spirit, and they think it is a good thing. They are proud of what they are. By the void, they are proud of what they are. Admiral HFY stared at the dark screen, his mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. In all their encounters with aggressive species, they had found beings motivated by hunger, territory, or survival. But humans seemed motivated by something far more dangerous, the simple, inexplicable desire to keep existing in spite of everything the universe threw at them. Recommendations? He asked quietly. The chamber remained silent. For the first time in galactic history, the Council had encountered a species that terrified an artificial intelligence simply by being themselves. The emergency session had been called within hours of the probe's testimony. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the Council's grand chamber, their forms ranging from crystalline beings that hummed with electromagnetic frequencies to gas-based entities that floated in specialized containment fields. All of them shared one thing in common. They were trying to understand how a species they had dismissed as primitives had managed to traumatize an artificial intelligence. Senator Kylthara, a six-limbed insectoid whose species had conquered half a dozen star systems through calculated warfare, was the first to speak. The data must be corrupted. No species develops to spaceflight capability while maintaining such aggressive tendencies. Natural selection eliminates violent traits as societies advance. Tell that to the probe, Admiral HFY replied grimly. Our best technicians have verified the authenticity of every transmission. The humans are exactly what they appear to be. Dr. Mel Anden, the Council's chief xenopsychologist, floated forward in her environmental suit. Her gaseous form pulsed with anxious colors as she reviewed the data on her portable display. I have studied the psychological profiles of over 300 species. Aggression typically decreases proportionally with technological advancement. The humans appear to have violated this fundamental law of civilization development. The debate that followed lasted for 17 standard hours. Some council members argued for immediate military intervention, suggesting that humanity posed an existential threat to galactic stability. Others advocated for careful study from a distance, hoping to understand how such a paradoxical species had evolved. A few suggested that the probe had simply malfunctioned and that humans were likely no different from any other developing civilization. It was Councillor Vethara who provided the most disturbing insight. Her crystalline form shifted through deep purple hues as she accessed the galactic archive. I have been reviewing our historical records. In the past 50,000 years, we have encountered exactly one other species that displayed similar characteristics to the humans. The chamber fell silent. Every representative knew the story of the Forgotten War, though most preferred not to discuss it. It had been the only conflict in recorded galactic history where the Council had been forced to completely sterilize an entire star system. The Vrixani, Bethara continued, her voice carrying harmonics of dread. They also showed unusual persistence in combat, unusual adaptation to adverse conditions, and unusual resistance to surrender. It took the combined fleets of 18 species to contain them, and even then they fought until their homeworld was nothing but radioactive debris. The humans are not the Vrixani, protested Senator Kylthara. The probe's data shows they have not even achieved faster-than-light travel. They are contained within their own system. Admiral Zexhi's aide stepped forward with a new datapad. Sir, that may no longer be accurate. We have detected unusual energy signatures from the human system. It appears they are conducting experiments with exotic matter. Dr. Mel Landon's form flashed bright red with alarm. Exotic matter manipulation without proper theoretical foundation? That is incredibly dangerous. Most species don't attempt such research until they have been spacefaring for millennia. The Cheroi, humans have been conducting these experiments for less than a century, since achieving nuclear fission, the aide reported. They appear to be attempting to develop faster-than-light communication and transportation through purely experimental methods. This revelation sent shock waves through the chamber. The standard development path for any spacefaring species involved gradual technological progression over thousands of years, with each advancement building carefully on the last. Safe, faster-than-light travel required not just the technology, but the wisdom to use it responsibly. Most species didn't achieve it until they had already established peaceful contact with galactic civilization. The humans were apparently trying to skip several thousand years of cautious development and jump directly to technologies that could either revolutionize galactic travel or accidentally destroy their entire solar system. Have they shown any awareness of the dangers? Asked Counselor Thexmore, whose species had accidentally destroyed 3 planets during their own experimental phase. The aide consulted his data. Their scientific literature indicates they are fully aware that their experiments could potentially create black holes, tear holes in space-time, or trigger quantum cascade failures. They have documented these risks in detail and have chosen to proceed anyway. The chamber erupted in shocked chatter. Risk assessment was considered one of the fundamental traits of intelligent life. Species that couldn't properly evaluate danger typically eliminated themselves long before achieving spaceflight. The idea that humans would deliberately pursue research they knew could destroy them suggested either suicidal tendencies or confidence that bordered on insanity. Perhaps, suggested Dr. Melandon hesitantly, they have calculated that the benefits outweigh the risks. Admiral Zexhi activated a holographic display showing the probe's analysis of human risk-benefit calculations. The data was disturbing. Humans routinely engaged in activities with minimal benefits and significant risks. They climbed mountains that could kill them for personal satisfaction. They participated in extreme sports that offered no survival advantage. They consumed substances they knew were harmful because they enjoyed the effects. Most bizarrely, they had created entire industries around deliberately frightening themselves for entertainment. They built elaborate structures designed to simulate mortal danger, paid money to experience terror, and considered fear to be a form of recreation. This suggests a fundamental neurological abnormality, Dr. Mel Andon observed. Normal species develop fear responses to promote survival. Humans appear to have developed fear responses for pleasure. It gets worse, the aide continued. Analysis of their entertainment media shows they fantasize about surviving apocalyptic scenarios. They create detailed fictional accounts of their civilization collapsing and focus on stories where individuals rebuild society from nothing. They appear to view the complete destruction of their way of life as a challenging, but ultimately surmountable problem. Senator Kylthara's antennae twitched with agitation. No rational species would consider civilizational collapse to be entertainment. The preservation of society is the fundamental drive of all intelligent life. The humans also appear to find warfare entertaining, Admiral Zexhi added. Their recreational activities include simulated combat, strategic warfare games, and competitive physical conflict. They have turned violence into art forms and celebrate their most successful warriors as cultural heroes. The probe's data included samples of human military history, and the council members who reviewed it emerged visibly shaken. Humans had developed increasingly efficient methods of killing each other, then immediately began preparing for even more devastating conflicts. They had created weapons capable of sterilizing their entire planet, and had somehow refrained from using them not through wisdom or peace treaties, but through the terrifying logic of mutually assured destruction. They had looked at the possibility of complete annihilation and decided it was an acceptable risk to maintain their ability to destroy their enemies. The probe's psychological analysis concludes that humans view conflict as a natural and necessary part of existence, Dr. Melandon reported. They don't just accept that violence will occur, they actively prepare for it and in many cases, look forward to it. Counselor Vethara's crystalline form had shifted to deep black, indicating maximum stress. The probe was correct to be terrified. We are looking at a species that combines advanced problem-solving capabilities with aggressive tendencies that should have caused self-extinction millions of years ago. They are an evolutionary impossibility. More than that, Admiral Zexhai said quietly, they are a species that appears to thrive on the very conditions that destroy other civilizations. War, disaster, scarcity, danger. These are not obstacles to humans. They are challenges that humans use to grow stronger. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Every species in the Galactic Council had achieved peace and prosperity by overcoming their violent instincts and learning to cooperate. They had assumed this was the only path to lasting civilization. The humans suggested there might be another way, a path that led to the stars through conflict rather than peace, through embracing danger rather than avoiding it. And if humans ever achieved faster-than-light travel, they would bring that philosophy to the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Chen was having the worst day of her career, and considering she had once accidentally created a small black hole in her laboratory, that was saying something. The alien probe that had been orbiting Earth for the past 6 months had finally made contact, but instead of the diplomatic first contact scenario every scientist had dreamed of, they had received what could only be described as a restraining order from space. "Read it again," she said to her colleague, Dr. Marcus Webb, as they stood in the emergency briefing room beneath the International Space Coordination Center. Marcus cleared his throat and read from the translated transmission. "To the dominant species of the third planet, your system has been designated as a no-contact zone by order of the Galactic Council. Any attempt to leave your solar system will be met with immediate military intervention. This is for the safety of all galactic civilizations." Sarah rubbed her temples. "So let me get this straight. Our first contact with alien intelligence and they're basically telling us we're too dangerous to be allowed out of our room?" "That appears to be the situation, yes," confirmed General Patricia Hayes, the military liaison who had been assigned to the project. "But here's the interesting part. They're not trying to conquer us or destroy us. They're afraid of us." Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the team's xenopsychologist, looked up from her tablet where she had been analyzing the transmission's linguistic patterns. The emotional undertones in their message suggest genuine terror. Whatever their probe observed during its time here, it convinced an entire galactic civilization that we pose an existential threat. "That's ridiculous," Sarah protested. "We can barely get to Mars reliably. We're still fighting over resources on our own planet. What could we possibly do to scare an advanced spacefaring civilization?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Harrison, a military historian who had been brought in to provide context for human warfare patterns, set down a thick folder of documents. "I think I know what frightened them. I've been analyzing the data our probe transmitted about human society, trying to see ourselves through alien eyes." He activated the holographic display in the center of the room. Images of human achievements appeared in sequence. The pyramids, the Roman Colosseum, medieval castles, modern skyscrapers. Every human civilization has been built on the foundation of overcoming impossible challenges. We don't just survive difficulties, we actively seek them out. "That's called progress," General Hayes pointed out. "No, that's called insanity by galactic standards," Dr. Harrison replied. "Look at our space program. When we first left Earth's atmosphere, we knew there was a significant chance we would die. Our early rockets failed more often than they succeeded. We sent people into space in machines that had a higher failure rate than most kitchen appliances." Sarah frowned. "We accepted calculated risks for scientific advancement, did we? Or did we send people to their probable deaths because we thought it would be exciting? Dr. Harrison changed the display to show footage of early space missions. Listen to the audio recordings. The astronauts aren't terrified or resigned to their fate. They're enthusiastic. They wanted to go knowing they might die because they thought it would be fun. Dr. Tanaka looked disturbed. From an outside perspective, that could appear to be a form of collective madness. Dr. Harrison nodded grimly. And it gets worse. Our entertainment industry has convinced the aliens that we fantasize about surviving apocalyptic scenarios. They've analyzed our movies, books, and games. From their perspective, humans actively dream about their civilization collapsing so they can have the fun of rebuilding it. General Hayes laughed. That's not entirely inaccurate. Post-apocalyptic fiction is incredibly popular because we find the idea entertaining, Dr. Harrison emphasized. We enjoy imagining scenarios where everything we've built is destroyed, and we have to start over with nothing but our wits and determination. Most species would find such thoughts horrifying. We find them inspiring. Sarah was beginning to understand the scope of the problem, so they think we're a species that actively seeks out conflict and danger. We are a species that actively seeks out conflict and danger, Dr. Harrison corrected. We call it exploration, advancement, progress, or entertainment. But from an objective standpoint, we deliberately place ourselves in harmful situations for psychological satisfaction. Dr. Webb pulled up his own data set. I've been reviewing the probe's analysis of our scientific research. They've identified several projects that they consider to be evidence of suicidal tendencies. The Large Hadron Collider, for instance. From their perspective, we built a machine that could potentially create strangelets capable of converting all matter on Earth into strange matter. But we calculated the risks, Sarah protested. Yes, and we decided the risks were acceptable because the potential knowledge gain was worth the possibility of accidentally destroying the planet, Dr. Webb replied. That's not rational risk assessment by galactic standards. That's the behavior of a species with a pathological need to push boundaries regardless of consequences. General Hayes looked thoughtful. You know, they might have a point. We've developed enough nuclear weapons to sterilize our own planet multiple times over, and instead of getting rid of them, we've maintained them as a deterrent. We've essentially held a gun to our own head and told our enemies that if they attack us, we'll pull the trigger. Mutually assured destruction, Dr. Tanaka mused. When you explain it to an outsider, it does sound completely insane. Dr. Harrison activated a new set of displays showing human military history. But here's what really terrified their probe. It's not just that we're violent or reckless, it's that we get better under pressure. Every major advancement in human civilization has come in response to threats, challenges, or catastrophes. The images showed human achievements born from adversity, medical breakthroughs discovered during plagues, technological innovations developed during wartime, social progress achieved through revolution and conflict. Each crisis had made humanity stronger, more adaptable, more capable. Most species achieve peace and prosperity by eliminating challenges and creating stability, Dr. Harrison continued. Humans achieve peace and prosperity by conquering challenges and thriving in chaos. We don't just adapt to hostile environments. We turn hostile environments into advantages. Sarah stared at the data, finally grasping the full implications. They're afraid because we represent a completely different evolutionary path. We're proof that a species can reach the stars through conflict instead of cooperation. Worse than that, General Hayes added, we're proof that conflict might actually be a superior path. Every challenge they've observed us face has only made us stronger. From their perspective, we're not just dangerous, we're infectiously dangerous. Dr. Tanaka nodded slowly. If other species observed human methods and decided to emulate them, it could destabilize the entire galactic order. They've built their civilization on the principle that advancement requires peace. We've built ours on the principle that advancement requires challenge. The room fell silent as the team contemplated their situation. They were being quarantined not because they were primitive or violent, but because they represented a fundamental threat to the galaxy's understanding of how civilization should work. So what do? Sarah asked finally. Do we accept their quarantine and stay in our solar system forever? General Hayes smiled grimly. That depends. Are we going to let a bunch of aliens tell us where we can and can't go? Dr. Harrison laughed. General, I think you just proved their point about human nature. Good, General Hayes replied. If they wanted us to stay put, they shouldn't have told us it was forbidden. That just makes it more interesting. The team exchanged glances, each recognizing the truth in the general's words. Being told they were too dangerous to leave their solar system hadn't discouraged them. If anything, it had made the prospect of interstellar travel more appealing. They were, Sarah realized, exactly as dangerous as the aliens feared. 2 years after the Galactic Quarantine Declaration, the Hermes station hung in the void between Earth and Mars, like a gleaming testament to human stubbornness. What had started as a routine deep space research facility had been transformed into humanity's most ambitious project, a faster-than-light drive powered entirely by spite and scientific curiosity. Dr. Sarah Chen floated through the station's central laboratory, reviewing the latest test results with barely contained excitement. The exotic matter containment system was holding steady. The quantum field generators were operating within acceptable parameters, and the navigation computers had successfully plotted a course to Proxima Centauri. Everything was ready for humanity's first intentional violation of galactic law. "Sarah, you need to see this," called Dr. Marcus Webb from his monitoring station. His face was pale with concern as he gestured to his displays. "We're getting massive energy readings from the outer system boundary." The main screen lit up with tactical data as sensor arrays throughout the solar system fed information to the station. 3 massive alien vessels had appeared at the edge of the heliosphere, their technology so advanced that human sensors could barely comprehend what they were detecting. "Blockade ships," confirmed Captain Torres, the military commander assigned to the project. "They're positioning themselves to intercept any vessel attempting to leave the system." General Hayes, who had been overseeing the project from Earth, appeared on the communication screen. "Dr. Chen, we've received a new transmission from the Galactic Council. They're demanding that we cease all faster-than-light research immediately and surrender the Hermes station for inspection." Sarah laughed, surprising everyone in the room. "They actually think we're going to surrender our research because they asked nicely?" "The message was not particularly nice," General Hayes replied dryly. "They've classified us as a class-wide existential threat and authorized the use of necessary force to contain us." Dr. Yuki Tanaka looked up from her psychological analysis console. "I've been monitoring their communications. The fear levels in their transmissions have increased exponentially since we began FTL testing. They're genuinely terrified that we're about to achieve interstellar travel." "Maybe because we are," Captain Torres observed. "The question is whether we can break through their blockade before they decide to destroy us, rather than risk us escaping." Dr. Webb pulled up the technical specifications of the alien vessels. "Their ships are larger and more advanced than anything we could hope to match in conventional terms. But they're also designed for patrol duty and deterrence, not actual combat against a desperate enemy." "You think we can fight them?" General Hayes asked. "I think we can surprise them," Sarah replied. "They've been studying human military history, but they don't understand human military psychology. They expect us to either surrender or attempt a careful, planned escape. They're not prepared for something reckless." Dr. Harrison, who had been coordinating with Earth's major military powers, activated his communication link. "Sarah, I have some information that might be relevant. Our intelligence services have been analyzing the alien quarantine fleet. They've positioned themselves to block the most logical escape routes from our solar system." "Which means," Captain Torres prompted, "they've left the most dangerous route relatively unguarded because they assume no rational species would attempt it," Dr. Harrison explained. "There's a clear path through the inner system, but it would require flying dangerously close to the sun and using solar gravity to achieve escape velocity." Dr. Webb ran the calculations quickly. "That would work, but the radiation exposure would be lethal to any known species. The heat alone would destroy most starship materials." "Most starship materials," Sarah repeated thoughtfully. "But not all of them. And certainly not if we don't plan to survive the trip in conventional terms." The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Captain Torres was the first to speak. "Dr. Chen, please tell me you're not suggesting what I think you're suggesting." "I'm suggesting we do what humans do best," Sarah replied. "Something completely insane that no rational species would attempt. We're going to use the Hermes station as a projectile." Dr. Tanaka stared at her. You want to deliberately crash the station into the sun's gravity well and use the acceleration to break through the blockade? Not crash into it, slingshot around it, Sarah corrected. We load the station with every piece of human knowledge, culture, and technology we can fit into the data banks, then send it on a trajectory that takes it so close to the sun that no alien ship could follow without being destroyed. General Hayes leaned forward on the screen. And the crew? The crew evacuates to Earth before we begin the maneuver, Captain Torres said slowly, understanding the plan. We turn the station into an unmanned probe carrying humanity's legacy to the stars. It's completely insane, Dr. Webb observed. The heat and radiation would destroy most of the station's systems. There's no guarantee anything would survive the passage. But if it does survive, Dr. Harrison added, it would achieve faster-than-light velocity in a trajectory the aliens can't predict or intercept. It would be in interstellar space before they could react. Sarah nodded. And once it's out there, it would automatically begin broadcasting human culture, science, and philosophy to every inhabited system within 100 light years. We wouldn't just be escaping the quarantine. We'd be introducing humanity to the galaxy whether the Council wants us to or not. Dr. Tanaka pulled up psychological profiles of various galactic species. The fear factor alone would be devastating to their morale. From their perspective, humans would have just demonstrated the ability to turn suicide missions into strategic victories. There's another advantage, Captain Torres added. If this works, every species in the galaxy will know that quarantining humans doesn't stop us. It just makes us more creative about escaping. They'll have to choose between actual warfare or accepting that we're not going to be contained. General Hayes was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications. This plan violates every principle of safe space exploration. The risks are astronomical, the chances of success are minimal, and if it fails, we lose our most advanced research station and possibly trigger a war with an entire galactic civilization. So you're saying it's perfect, Sarah replied with a grin that would have terrified the aliens if they could have seen it. Dr. Webb began running preliminary calculations. We would need to reconfigure the exotic matter containment system to function as a propulsion enhancement rather than just an FTL drive. The quantum field generators would have to be overcharged beyond safe parameters, and we'd need to compress our entire cultural database into radiation-hardened storage systems. How long do we have before the Council ships move to a more aggressive posture? Captain Torres asked. Based on their communication patterns, maybe 72 hours, Dr. Tanaka replied. They're still trying to convince us to surrender peacefully, but their patience is running out. Sarah looked around the room at her colleagues, seeing the same mixture of excitement and terror in their faces that she felt in her own heart. They were about to attempt something that would either announce humanity's arrival on the galactic stage or provide a spectacular demonstration of why humans should never be allowed near advanced technology. All right, people, she said. Let's show the galaxy what happens when you tell humans they can't do something. Dr. Webb, begin reconfiguring the drive systems. Captain Torres, coordinate the evacuation procedures. Dr. Tanaka, start compressing our cultural databases, and someone send a message to Earth telling them to prepare for the consequences of what we're about to do. As the team scattered to their tasks, Sarah remained floating in the center of the laboratory, staring out at the distant stars that the aliens thought they could prevent humanity from reaching. In 72 hours, they would discover that telling humans something was impossible was the fastest way to ensure they would attempt it. The galaxy, she reflected, was about to learn why the probe had come back screaming. The Hermes station's final crew evacuation pod detached with a soft thump that reverberated through the hull. Dr. Sarah Chen watched through the observation deck as the small craft accelerated toward Earth, carrying the last human beings who would ever set foot on humanity's most ambitious space station. In 3 hours, the station would either be a radioactive pile of debris falling into the sun, or the first human-made object to achieve faster-than-light travel. All systems are green for the crazy plan, Dr. Webb announced from the primary control station, his voice carrying across the empty corridors through the intercom system. The skeleton crew of 5 had volunteered to remain aboard until the final moment, when they would transfer to the specially shielded escape pod that would attempt to ride the station's wake through the most dangerous part of the maneuver. The aliens are responding to our trajectory change, reported Captain Torres from the tactical station. 3 ships are moving to intercept, but they're maintaining what they consider safe distance from solar radiation. Admiral Zexhi's voice crackled through the communication array as the lead alien vessel attempted one final negotiation. Human vessel, you are proceeding on a trajectory that will result in the complete destruction of your craft and crew. This is illogical. Cease this action and accept Council protection. Sarah activated the response system, knowing this would likely be humanity's last official communication with galactic civilization for some time. Admiral Zexhi, thank you for your concern about our safety. However, humans have a saying, it's better to burn out than to fade away. We're about to demonstrate what that means. The alien response came immediately, confusion evident even through the translation matrix. Explain burnout then fade away. This expression makes no logical sense. Admiral, you're about to get a very practical demonstration, Sarah replied, then cut the communication link. Dr. Webb, initiate the solar approach sequence. The station's modified engines fired in precise bursts, adjusting their trajectory toward the sun with mathematical precision that belied the insanity of their plan. Outside the viewports, the star that had nurtured human civilization for millions of years grew steadily larger and more menacing. Dr. Tanaka monitored the alien fleet's positions from her sensor station. They're holding formation at what they consider minimum safe distance. The closest ship is still over 10 million kilometers from our approach vector. Cowards, Captain Torres muttered. Their ships could probably handle solar radiation levels we're about to encounter, but they're not willing to risk it. That's what we're counting on, Sarah reminded him. Dr. Webb, status on the exotic matter containment system. Operating at 130% of design capacity and rising, Dr. Webb reported. The quantum field generators are creating space-time distortions that should amplify our velocity gain from the solar gravity well. If this works, we'll achieve faster-than-light velocity about 17 minutes after periapsis. And if it doesn't work? Asked Dr. Harrison, who had remained aboard to document humanity's first attempt at interstellar travel. Then we'll become the most expensive funeral pyre in human history, Sarah replied cheerfully. But our databanks will survive long enough to broadcast humanity's story to the galaxy before the station disintegrates. The temperature readings began climbing as they approached the inner solar system. Mercury passed below them like a scorched marble, its surface glowing with reflected solar radiation. The station's heat shields were already operating beyond their design limits. But the modifications Dr. Webb had made to the cooling systems were holding. Solar radiation is increasing exponentially, Dr. Webb announced. We're now at radiation levels that would be lethal to most known galactic species. Good thing we're not most known galactic species, Captain Torres observed. How are our alien friends handling the heat? Dr. Tanaka checked her sensors. The Council ships have fallen back another 5 million kilometers. They're monitoring our approach, but they're clearly not prepared to follow us into the inner system. The sun dominated their forward view now, a roiling sphere of nuclear fire that no living being should approach. Solar flares danced across its surface, each one releasing more energy than human civilization had generated in its entire history. The station's radiation alarms were screaming constant warnings that everyone aboard had long since learned to ignore. Approaching point of no return, Dr. Webb announced. Once we pass this marker, our trajectory becomes irreversible. We're committed to the slingshot maneuver whether the systems hold or not. Sarah looked around at her colleagues, seeing the same mixture of terror and exhilaration that she felt in her own heart. They were about to attempt something that violated every principle of safe space exploration, and they were doing it because alien bureaucrats had told them they couldn't leave their solar system. All right, people, this is it, she announced. In about 2 hours, we're either going to be the first humans to achieve faster-than-light travel, or we're going to be really interesting plasma. Either way, we're making history. The approach to periapsis became a nightmare of increasing heat, radiation, and gravitational stress. The station's hull groaned under forces it was never designed to withstand. Systems failed and were replaced by backup systems, which failed and were replaced by emergency systems, which were held together by determination and increasingly creative engineering. Hull temperature is approaching critical levels, Dr. Webb reported, his voice steady despite the sweat pouring down his face. The exotic matter containment field is destabilizing. but it's creating exactly the space-time distortions we need for velocity amplification. Through the observation deck windows, the sun's surface appeared close enough to touch. Solar prominences thousands of kilometers high erupted from the star's surface, creating temporary bridges of plasma that could have swallowed entire planets. The view was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying, like staring into the heart of creation itself. Periapsis in 30 seconds, Captain Torres announced, all non-essential crew to the escape pod. This is the point where things get really dangerous. Dr. Webb laughed hysterically. Really dangerous. We're flying a space station into the sun's gravity well at impossible velocities, using experimental technology that could tear holes in space-time. When exactly was this plan not really dangerous? Fair point, Sarah admitted. But now we find out if our calculations were correct, or if we're about to become a very brief light show. The moment of periapsis arrived with surprising gentleness. Despite the enormous forces involved, the crew felt only a slight increase in apparent gravity as the station swung around the sun's gravity well at a velocity that should have been impossible. The exotic matter containment system screamed warnings as it channeled energies that human science barely understood. Then something wonderful and terrible happened. The space around the station began to distort visibly, reality bending as the exotic matter field interacted with the extreme gravitational environment. The stars outside began to shift and stretch as the station approached the threshold of faster-than-light travel. It's working, Dr. Webb announced in amazement. The field distortions are creating a localized space-time bubble. We're approaching light speed and accelerating. The alien fleet's frantic communications filled the radio spectrum as they watched the impossible happen. A primitive human vessel was achieving faster-than-light travel using methods that shouldn't have been possible, in an environment that should have destroyed it instantly. FTL transition in 10 seconds, Sarah announced to the empty corridors. To anyone listening to this recording, tell the galaxy that humans have officially left the building. The station crossed the light barrier with a flash of exotic radiation that temporarily blinded sensors throughout the solar system. When the energy dissipated, the Hermes station was gone, carrying its cargo of human knowledge, culture, and stubborn determination toward the stars at impossible velocities. In the escape pod, racing to clear the radiation zone before their shielding failed, the crew watched their readings in amazement. The station's beacon was still transmitting, its signal growing stronger as it achieved stable faster-than-light velocity. Signal lock confirmed, Dr. Tanaka reported. The station is maintaining course toward Proxima Centauri at approximately 12 times the speed of light. Estimated arrival time is 6 months. Sarah stared at the readings, hardly believing what they had accomplished. They had just proved that human determination and alien fear were both entirely justified. They had also proved that telling humans something was impossible was the fastest way to ensure they would find a way to do it anyway. The galaxy was about to receive its first official delegation from humanity, whether it wanted one or not. 6 months after the Hermes station's impossible escape from the solar system, the Proxima Centauri system received its first human visitor with all the fanfare of a solar flare. The battered station, its hull scarred by radiation and exotic forces, emerged from faster-than-light travel broadcasting human music, literature, scientific data, and what appeared to be something called memes across every frequency the galaxy used for communication. The first alien civilization to receive humanity's cultural package was the Centauri Collective, a peaceful trading species that specialized in mathematical philosophy and precision manufacturing. Their reaction was immediate and predictable. They forwarded the entire transmission to the Galactic Council with a priority alert that roughly translated to, "What in the name of entropy is this?" Admiral Zexhai stared at the data streaming across his command console with the expression of someone watching their carefully ordered universe collapse into chaos. The humans had not only escaped quarantine using a method that should have killed them, they had done so in a manner that violated several known laws of physics and at least 3 principles of basic survival instinct. "Report," he commanded his aide, though part of him didn't want to know. "Sir, the human vessel achieved stable faster-than-light velocity by using exotic matter interactions in a solar gravity well. Our scientists estimate the probability of survival for such a maneuver at approximately 0.003%, and yet they survived." "Yes, sir." "Worse, they appear to have intentionally broadcast their cultural database to every inhabited system within 50 light years. We're receiving reports from 17 different civilizations that have been exposed to human cultural material. Admiral HFY activated the holographic display, showing the expanding sphere of human transmission spreading through local space like a virus. Each infected system was forwarding the data to neighboring systems, partly out of scientific curiosity and partly out of horrified fascination. What has been the reaction to the cultural material? The aide's tentacles writhed with distress. Mixed, sir. The Centauri Collective has declared the human mathematical proofs to be elegantly insane. The Crystal Confederation is studying human music and reports that it contains emotional patterns they've never encountered. The gas giant communes are attempting to understand something called humor and have requested additional data. Any negative reactions? The Vrashti Empire declared the cultural package to be evidence of humanity's unfitness for galactic society, then immediately began studying human military tactics for potential application. 3 minor civilizations have requested permission to establish trade relations with Earth. Admiral HFY rubbed his ceremonial claws against his temples, feeling the beginning of what humans would have recognized as a stress headache. And the Council's response? Emergency session in 2 hours, sir. The humans have effectively forced first contact on their own terms. The quarantine has been broken, and attempting to contain the cultural contamination would require censoring 17 different species. The emergency session was unlike anything in the Council's history. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in virtual conference, their forms flickering through holographic displays as they debated humanity's fate. The chamber hummed with excited chatter, nervous energy, and what could only be described as intellectual panic. Counselor Vethara's crystalline form pulsed with deep red stress patterns as she reviewed the cultural data. The humans have violated quarantine, achieved faster-than-light travel through methods that should have been impossible, and introduced concepts that are already beginning to influence other species. This is exactly the scenario we feared. Is it? Asked Dr. Melandon, her gaseous form swirling with curious colors. I have been analyzing the human cultural material, and while it is certainly unusual, it is not inherently harmful. Their scientific methods, while reckless, have produced remarkable results. Their art forms contain emotional complexity we have never encountered. Their philosophical frameworks challenge assumptions we have held for millennia. Senator Kylthera's antennae twitched with agitation. Their philosophical frameworks include the concept of die-trying, which they consider to be a positive motivational principle. They have created entertainment based on scenarios where small groups of individuals defeat impossible odds through determination and sacrifice. They celebrate failure as a learning experience rather than treating it as a reason for caution. And yet, Dr. Melandon continued, their approach has allowed them to achieve in centuries what most species require millennia to accomplish. They have gone from primitive chemical rockets to faster-than-light travel in less than 100 years. Their adaptation rate is unprecedented. Admiral HFY shared the tactical analysis his fleet had prepared. The humans' escape method has already been studied by military strategists from 8 different species. The concept of using impossible maneuvers as tactical advantages is beginning to influence galactic military thinking. You're saying other species are adopting human methods? Counselor Vethara asked in alarm. The Vrashti Empire has announced a new military doctrine based on what they call acceptable losses for strategic advantage. The Crystal Confederation is experimenting with creative problem-solving under pressure. Even our own council fleets are developing contingency plans for scenarios previously considered impossible. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't just escaped quarantine. They had begun a cultural revolution that was spreading through galactic civilization like wildfire. Species that had lived in peaceful stability for thousands of years were suddenly asking questions about whether their methods were the only way to achieve success. Dr. Melandon brought up a new holographic display showing cultural analysis data. I believe we have misunderstood the fundamental nature of the threat humans represent. We assumed they were dangerous because they were violent or unstable. But the real threat is that they offer an alternative to our entire civilization model. Explain, Admiral HFY requested. Every species in the galaxy achieved interstellar travel by following essentially the same path. Gradual technological development, social stabilization, peaceful cooperation, risk minimization. We assumed this was the only viable method because it was the only method we had observed. And the humans? The humans represent proof that an entirely different path is possible. They achieve advancement through challenge rather than stability, through risk rather than safety, through competition rather than cooperation, and their method appears to be faster and more adaptable than ours. Senator Calthera's form shuddered. You're suggesting that human methods might be superior to galactic civilization standards? I'm suggesting that human methods might be an equally valid alternative, Dr. Melandon corrected. And that possibility threatens the fundamental assumptions our entire society is built upon. Admiral Zexhai reviewed the latest reports from the quarantine fleet. We have three options. We can attempt to suppress human influence through military force, which would require warfare against any species that has adopted human cultural elements. We can attempt to contain human expansion, which has already proven ineffective. Or we can acknowledge that humans represent a new type of galactic citizen and adapt our policies accordingly. The debate that followed lasted 18 standard hours. Some council members argued for military suppression, others for continued containment, and a growing minority for acceptance and integration. In the end, it was Councillor Vithara who proposed the solution that would reshape galactic civilization. The humans have forced us to confront a fundamental question. Is our way of achieving civilization the only acceptable way, or simply the way we chose? If we suppress human influence through force, we become the very thing we claim to protect the galaxy from. If we continue to attempt containment, we validate their belief that conflict and challenge are necessary for growth. Your recommendation? Admiral Zexhai asked. We establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth and invite them to join the Galactic Council as an observer species. We study their methods, they study ours, and we see what we can learn from each other. It's possible that the galaxy might benefit from a little human-style creative problem-solving. The vote was closer than anyone expected, but it passed. For the first time in galactic history, the Council had voted to admit a species that had achieved membership by escaping quarantine rather than demonstrating peaceful intentions. As the session ended, Admiral Zexhai reflected on the probe's final words about humans being proud of what they were. He was beginning to understand that the probe's terror had been justified, but perhaps not for the reasons they had assumed. The humans weren't dangerous because they were monsters. They were dangerous because they were proof that monsters weren't necessary for greatness. They had achieved the impossible through determination, creativity, and a willingness to risk everything for the chance to grow. The galaxy would never be the same, and perhaps Admiral Zexhai thought as he composed the first official diplomatic message to Earth, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. 3 months later, when the first human diplomatic mission arrived at the council chambers in a ship that had been LE,